Welcome to the Inner Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Paul Ryan, and today's guest is Stephen Tuig. Stephen is a long-time pro in the business of personal development. He is an author, facilitator, and a guide for over the past 25 years. And 10 of those were with the Tony Robbins organization. So, in my books, that's about as good as it gets when it comes to learning all this stuff. So, Stephen, it is a pleasure to have you and welcome to the
Thanks for
podcast.
having me, Paul. It's great to reconnect with you.
Isn't it just? Normally this is the point of where I throw over to the guests and ask them to tell me all about themselves. Could you give me 2 minutes to tell you a little story
That would
before
be
then? Would that
great.
be
Yep.
okay with you?
Yep.
Cool. So what I wanna do is explain to our listeners how we have ended up on this call, and actually explain to you how we've ended up on this call. So the starting point for getting on this call with you was January 2006. So maybe you're quicker maths. Is that 18 years ago? So it's a it's a very long time ago. And a very long time ago, I was sitting in my office in Dublin in Ireland. My phone rings. It's a friend of mine, and he invites me to London for the weekend. He says, Paul, have you ever heard of Tony Robbins? And I'm going, yeah, actually, doesn't he have some books or something? So I'm going, he says, well, he's doing a course in London for the weekend called UPW Unleash the Power Within. And so he says, there's a group of us coming. Why don't you come along? Now, I knew of Tony because I'd seen a book on the shelf and I'd maybe read a couple of pages. Didn't know a lot else. I did not know what Unleash the Power Within was. Uh, but at the time, I was very successful in business, um, but I was miserable. I mean, and to the outside, it looked great, and to the inside, I was unhappy every day. And so I said, yes, I need to do something. I got on a plane, flew to London, had no idea that this lunatic was going to come on stage and we're going to come and stay. I mean, I remember sitting in the Excel Arena in London, going, "Will he at least let me out to eat or get water?" So I'd no idea no, he does no idea what was coming. But what was more terrifying was within a very short period of while, I realized I was gonna be doing a fire walk that night, and I literally thought to myself, "What the fuck have I got myself in for?" Anyway, the summary of all of that is that weekend was a catalyst for me to entirely change my life. And 18 years later, I live a very privileged life. I get to do what I wanna do every day, and I'm not thanking Tony Robbins for that because I had to do the work. That's the way this shit works. But that weekend was the catalyst. And obviously on that journey, I then did lots of Tony Robbins stuff. And you were a business strategist for Tony Robbins for a decade. And that's where our paths crossed. And now you're doing your own thing. And I see you've written a book. And that's why I invited you on the podcast. So that's a long winded 18-year story of how you're sitting in the chair. Um, so that's my story. What's
Yeah.
yours?
Right. Well, it's interesting. You say, um, that's kind of how I got here. So I started my personal development journey. I wasn't successful. I was the exact opposite. So I was the guy. I used to say, if you couldn't be a good excuse, be a bad example. You know what I mean? Like I was the guy you would cross the street to avoid. I was very,
Oh, I
I was
see.
3 years old, trapped in a basement by my stepmom. Beat her. She beat me. She starved me. All this, but that structure of feeling trapped, that feeling of being trapped, never really left. And the mind orients the way the mind orients, and most of that's done in the deep conscious. We're not aware of it, so I was constantly trying to break out of this trap and at the same time creating a trap to break out of. So there's this cyclical destructive pattern that was going on in me. And I reached a breaking point April 2000, ended up walking through a door where I did um, my first depth work introduction was a men's organization, and they took me to meet my shadow, and it was the first step in going, what was that? Like I finally saw I saw something where it was like a glint of truth that I just couldn't find no matter how hard I looked. And so I just started following that. And I wanted to know, why do we find ourselves caught in these cycles of suffering? You talk about, here I am successful, but I'm miserable. How does that work? Like, how do we end up creating the very thing that we're trying to avoid by trying to avoid the thing that we've created? That kind of thing. And I just, for
Mhm.
me, I found it
Yeah.
fascinating and ended up, when somebody said, this is all uh, hypnotherapy. So we got hypnotherapy certified. This is all neurolinguistic programming, NLP certified. Then, of course, watching Tony on a video, and I saw him stand somebody up, and within, you know, 20 minutes,
Yeah.
they can't unknow that. Whatever it was that they learned about
Oh,
themselves, you can't unknow that. And I said, that was that weird. That was the weird thing that I was trying. I'm like, that's what it is. And so I just kept bugging them till they hired me. And
yeah.
I was good at sales. Like the one thing I was really good at was connecting with people. And because I have this shadow in me, interestingly enough, that I have this utter feel, even though I were on this call, Paul, I have this, there's a piece of me that is so certain that I'm going to be rejected. It's just, just
Wow.
my core, the certainty of it. Like the sun is going to come up tomorrow. There's this rejection that's going to happen on this call. So my mind then starts to orient and protect itself from that possibility. Why did I spend most of my life in sales? Well, it made me feel comfortable in rejection because they're not rejecting me, they're rejecting the product. So I got real good at that. And so Tony brought me on, and I became extra good at, he commissioned me to interview well over 10,000 business leaders ranging from your, you know, your startups to your multinational. It's how we met. What's working, what's not working, what's blocking you, what's not blocking you, like what is keeping you from reaching. And I just dug in. I wanted to know how deep down the rabbit hole does this problem go? And you know, you're one of my success stories. You found a way to implement it. That's really the name of the game. And I ended up running an integration group for about 3,000 business leaders where we would integrate these structures that Tony would take your business, strip it down to the bare bones over the course of, was it 5 days? And this immense, intense process, you know, 18 hours. It's like 30 below
Yeah.
zero in that room. Like, you know what I mean? People are wearing winter coats and they would go through this, you know, fairly expensive process and just excruciating in some ways process. And then they would come back and nothing would change. Like, why are we spending all this money and you're not? And so then I went into integration and really worked with that for a while. And when I left Tony 5 years ago, I I left because I needed to know, like, why are people not implementing? Why are people not, they know what they need to do, but they're still not doing it. I know they know what I sat and watched Tony tell you, and you nodded your head up and down. I talked to you after the event. You knew up and down. I call you a month later and you've done nothing. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And I found that, you know, the first rule is that we lie to ourselves first. The system that is the mind sets that, um,
Yeah.
you know, so I spent the
Entirely.
last 5 years doing deep dives into understanding the mind and how we trap ourselves, how powerful we are in those lies, way past what we even know. Um, and that's how we ended up here. And I wrote the
St-
book, and yeah,
Yeah. There's just so much in there that I could ask about, but so I really have to try and handpick one or two things. One thing is that when I did Unleash the Power Within, I did it twice. Then went and did Business Mastery twice, and I did Master University. I did the whole thing. It was interesting because this is 18 years ago, and certainly I was mocked by people for the money I was spending on this
exactly.
on Tony Robbins. I remember a friend of mine saying, "You know that guy is a janitor. You know, you're learning from a janitor." And so, but my understanding, he's a janitor that's now worth about half a
That's
billion.
right.
So that that's fine with me. Should I learn from a college professor who's earning $40,000 a year or a janitor at you choose. But a few things. One is that what the firewalk did for me, because you talk about this thing of people not changing, and that intrigues me as well for a few reasons. One is that because I did that in the Excel in London, I think there were about 10,000 people there. Obviously, I didn't know most of them, but I knew a small group of them because about 80 people went from Ireland. Uh, and I went a couple of times, and one of the things that struck me was this thing, exactly what you said. That people would leave that in phenomenal form. It's a rock concert. It's a show. It's you've got to experience it, and it's great fun. Exhausting, but great fun. But you come back and you're going to change the world, And it seems to me that most people don't. Now, what happened to me in the fire walk was I had no idea what was coming, and that was probably a good thing. So I sitting in the room, Tony's on stage. He has this big video wall of burning coals, and I go, "What the?" So I do this now. I remember calling my wife after it, and I don't do drugs, never have, never will. And my wife was going, "Are you on drugs?" Because I was so high. But the next so I think what that did was took me to an incredible high where I was just I'm invincible, I'm one of the Avengers. I can change the world. And then the next day we went through the Dickens
Yes.
process, I think is
Yep.
what it's called, and we got to see our future, and I got to see the road I was heading down if I didn't change, which was horrendously painful, people screaming and crying in the room. I then got to see the road I could go down if I did change, and what the maybe this links into the shadow work you were talking about. What the firewalk did for me was, for a brief period of time, made me super courageous. So I was fearless, and fearless means not only I'm fearless of you, it means I'm fearless of me. So in that next day, I was completely unafraid to look myself in the eye and go, mate, you live this life, you're going to die a miserable old man. You might be a rich, miserable old man, but you'll still be a fucking miserable old man, and you have to change. So but the other thing was that the change that took probably the next 2 or 3 years was enormously difficult for me. I mean, it was very painful, it was very difficult and took persistence. But I'm interested that you say that most people don't do that work. They come back because it's an incredible opportunity and they don't do the work.
Yeah. Well, again, I spent 10 years studying 10,000 hours, 1,000 hours direct study underneath him. And, I've gone all the way down. I spent the last 5 years, I've done, the Zen sits where you sit in total silence with the Zen masters. And I drank
Yeah,
the funky Kool-Aid, literal funky Kool-Aid, went and did
yeah,
the ayahuasca, the this, the that, did
yeah,
all
yeah.
that. And I needed to know how far down the rabbit hole it goes. And it's all made up. The root word for human being in Arabic is to forget. We
Yeah.
forget, and I believe there's a lot of I could go into the depth of that, but we start to look at the structure of consciousness and how we navigate. I do a thing called shadow ceremony, which is takes you to what I call your axis mundi, the center of your being, and we go through the shadow
Mm,
to get there because it's the one place people would never think to look. Let's go through your suffering, right? And the part you hide, repress, and deny. So we go in, and I've got this gal on the carpet, and much like Tony when he pulls people up, she steps up, and I say, "Okay, what's going on?" Well, she's a successful nurse in her field. She's getting ready to open up a coffee shop, and she's got this relationship, and everything's falling apart. And I said, "Tell me what's going on." Well, I can't stop spending money. I've got this shopping addiction. And I said, "Okay, well, take me to the moment because we don't think in time, we think in moments, and we store those moments in stories." So take me to the moment. So there she is. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. She's at the buy button. So she's at the, she's got a glass of wine. She's just tears are rolling.
she's ready to
Yeah. And she
press.
just can't, I
Yeah.
can't not hit that button.
Okay.
What's underneath that? We search, and what's underneath that is if I buy this, I'm telling myself I'm worth it. I'm worth it. So
Yeah.
what that is, if I'm reaching, I call that a zombie hunger, right? She's can't not reach for it. What she's reaching for is worth, external worth. She's coming from without. She's not coming from within. What's coming out of within is this experience of I'm worthless. So now she can hear it because the mind, the everybody that's listening right now in your mind, just say hello. There they are, and they don't ever shut up. And they're just
Yeah.
babbling. And that it becomes so we're so programmed to operate out of that that many times we don't even know it's happening. So then that's your conscious thought's only about 40 to 50 bits. You have a prefrontal cortex that has a massive bottleneck. Your prefrontal cortex, you can only process about 40 to 50 bits a second, but your mind, it's estimated takes in about 11 million bits of information every second. Like just yeah.
Wow.
So there's this massive bottleneck.
So you're gonna filter all that down
Exactly.
somehow then
Well,
to
it's
this
more
core.
like a pyramid. So it's like, think of a pyramid. You think of the eye on the pyramid. That eye represents awareness. You're only aware of a very small amount of the information. And like right now, as I'm talking, you're listening to words come out of my mouth and you're translating those words so fast that you don't even know you're translating them. But it's just, and
Yeah.
so you're making this meaning, and your mind is constantly, once it's got a meaning, once your mind is made up, it makes up that meaning and then it reaches for the next. And I don't question a meaning once made because thoughts are expensive. It takes over 20% of your caloric intake to think. So once I make up a mind, it loads it. That's the way life is. There's a part of me that's going to be trapped in a basement. There's a part of me that's going to be rejected. Now create strategies to orient from that. And that's suffering rooted. Don't put that back in conscious thought. So my mind is both out orienting from something and it's avoiding it. So it's got this orientation system where I have to orient my reality based upon my identification with what I already know, because there's that pyramid, right? So now she's got this button and she feels worthless, and I'm trying to get to worthless. I'm trying to get something so that if I'm trying to scratch an itch, I've got food in the back of I'm trying to get to. So she buys the button.
Yeah.
Says, so then what happens? I said, does it feel better? I'm thinking to myself, doesn't feel any better though, does it? She's like, oh no, I felt better. And I thought, okay, well, now I'm going, well, teach me. And I always, whenever I'm in front of somebody, it's like, they're my teacher. So teach me. Okay. So then what happens? Well, then in a couple of days, I've got to work extra hours to pay for whatever it is I've just purchased. And now I'm beat up and my feet are sore. And I've been on shift for a 12-hour shift, and I'm coming home and it's Wednesday, Thursday. Guess what's sitting at the door? The box.
How does it feel
Yeah.
now?
And now she sees the box, which then validates this thing that she was trying to get to, which was I was worthless. She now says, this is what, see how you beat yourself up? So the question becomes, Paul, is she buying that because she's trying to be worth it? Or is some part of her orienting her experience so that she has an experience of worthless that justifies the internal system that she's already created? In other words, is she orienting from the button or is she orienting from the box? The feeling of now I feel copacetic.
Are you saying, does she feel worthless to justify her behavior? It's
It's a balance. It's the loop. It's the loop of the structure of now I feel.
It's not necessarily the worthlessness comes first.
That's right. Yeah. And if we don't start to look at this, because this is an advanced system where the mind is projecting out onto the screen, and business is a spiritual sport. So when I say this, I've worked with, now in the past, just the 5 years. I mean, if we go into Tony's work, I can go much deeper, right? But that's Tony. In the past 5 years, the research that I've done, I've helped 5 business owners exit their business. And it's always interesting to me that as they get to the finish line, they start to notice problems that they just got to take care of, or and the reason why is because they've identified with this business has justified how they are and who they are. And now you're going to take that away from them. And it's almost like they start to resent the things that are going to allow them to be successfully exit. It's like one guy, we took him to 3 peaks because he just didn't want to exit. It's like, well, when are you going to exit? Like, when is the exit? When is enough? And he finally jumped out, and it took him about 6 months to climatize. But when we look back and look at it, it was all about orienting from that space of, you can't see the screen, but there's at the top of the structure here, I call this the construct. Our identity is the most powerful force in the human dynamic. We will do anything to stay consistent and persistent with the rules and the labels that we use to identify themselves, even if it's suffering rooted, because that 11 million bits of information, I've oriented from that. If you remove that, it's like some people will go, I don't know how to get up. If I'm not trying to survival rooted thinking, I won't know how to brush my teeth, because there's no system. So there's no meaning system now that orients from something that they've logically chose to bought into. And so everything that they know to be true has to be re-identified. And that's why it took you so long, because I've got to go in and re-identify. I'm not this, I am that. I am not this, I'm that. And we can only do that in 40 to 50 bits at a time. We can't do that at the 11 million. So they would leave and they would jump back into the same water that they were coming in, and they get what I call snapback, because everybody else around them, we're no man is an island. We're all the algorithms that are running in us are all attached to the people that we're living in. And those people have expectations of who we are and how we show up. And if we don't show up that way, we look like danger. So there's this snapback when we come back into the water, and we've got to orient from that, be aware, like you're going to snap back. The story you told yourself is you probably left UPW, left Business Master, went back and found this almost like a wall that you had to move through. Yeah. Right. And people don't orient because they don't understand the integration. I call it strategic integration. to be very strategic about what happens when we come home from a Tony Robbins event, a psychedelic integration, any add transformational experience here, right? We come back and our mind
Mm.
wants to go back to what it knows is normal. And many times that's the
Of course.
box because it's survival rooted.
Yeah, when I had that moment of realization that my life had to change, uh, I think what brought me forward was I had two very clear visions. I had the vision of the path I believed I was on. So I was in my mid-40s at that stage, and I saw this guy of 70 years of age, this dark gray old man. I said, this is the path you're on, Paul. This is the road you're on, my friend. It's where you're going." And it was horrible because I saw a life wasted. But then in the second visualization, I said, this is the road you would love to walk. This is the life you could create. So I think that they were both embedded deeply in me. But I think to some degree, because I went on that weekend so unhappy, the contrast maybe was what I moved. So I think had I not had that clear picture of what I was moving towards, I couldn't have moved towards it. And the second thing was that as I returned home on that on the plane, I looked at both again and said, "I'm not going there." So I made a clear decision. Um, but when I look at the hard work and some serious stress for probably 2 years or so to begin to shift on the other road. And the interesting thing was, as I moved on, I would then tell the story because to me it was a very interesting story, and I would tell the story about how I had transformed my life. My wife used to always interject and go, "You're skipping the 2 years." You know, I would go, "Hey, Stephen, I do this. I'm a great guy," and my wife would go, "You're skipping the 2 years," and I'd be kind of going, "I don't want to talk about that." Eventually, it dawned on me that's the most important part of the story because look, you're an expert in this, and I'm not. But my feeling is, if people realize that to change, they're going to have to do that work. Then, when the work turns up, you go, "This is the road." Like you wouldn't assume you could run the marathon without going, "I'll need to train for 12 months." And then when the training is hard, you go, "Shit, but that's what it
Yep.
is."
Well,
Does that make sense
oh,
of what you've
yeah. Well,
experienced?
people change. There's only two reasons people change. The primary reason, and 87% of our the structure, the makeup of mind right now is survival rooted. We 3.5 billion
Yeah,
years of we were food. You know what I mean? We've only been living in
yeah,
our society for a very short period of time. So most of us
yeah.
is structured in a way to avoid pain. So the first way that most people change is when the pain is staying the same is worse than the pain to change. People change, which is this is where I was
Yes.
going.
Which was
Yeah,
my
you
case.
also loaded onto the
Pain was
second,
worse.
which I think is even more that's the one that's tasty. That's the one I want to help. My mission is to help evolve our collective consciousness through engaging in the innate genius. That second level is when the solution becomes greater than the problem could ever be. When that
Yeah.
happens, when I see what I could be,
When you say solution, you mean
the
the
end
end
result,
result?
when I
What
see the end result, it could be the end result. It could
is
be,
greater than the
yeah, it could be a structure
hard
of
the road is.
thought. It
Yeah,
could be a
yeah.
belief system. It could be, I found God. It could be when the thing that I see, the outcome that I want to go to
Mm,
is that's worth everything to me.
mm.
If do you have kids, Paul? Okay.
I do, 3
Yeah,
adult
if we
sons.
were talking right now and one of them was on the other side of that wall and they had there's just a certain cry that they've got their pinky caught in the
Yeah,
trap, so to speak. You would a different identity comes online, a deeper version you would
yeah.
eat through the wall if you had to get there,
Mm,
right? When the solution becomes there's just no way I'm not gonna get there. And when we have a vision of life, what could be, that's higher than anything else, and that's what you saw. You saw the pain. I don't want to go there anymore. Tony's a
mm.
genius at the Dickens
Yeah.
process is powerful. And that
Yes,
second
it's
thing.
wonderful.
But again, insight without integration is just a daydream. Right.
I agree, yeah.
People leave, they got the vision and they think they got it. We are surface dwelling, consumer programmed. We are creators that have been programmed to be consumers. We are predators that have been posing as house pets. Like we are living on the surface of our thought. We're not taught to go down into the depths of who we really are and understand that there's more going on down there than what we know. And we stay on the surface and we are materialistic. It's a fractal reflection of the nature of our the current kind of boggle. And so we come out and we think we got it because we get the surface picture, and then we have to lean in and get dirty because change is messy. It's never I've never not seen that people think that spiritual enlightenment is this, white robe. It's not. I've seen it. It's
Certainly not.
ugly, hair all messed up, like slobber everywhere. You just come out all disoriented. Like it's messy. And if a person is not willing to get messy, like it's like you got to know that right off the bat. You got to be willing to go into that 2 years because but I'd be willing to bet. Here's my question, Paul. There's probably times in that 2 years where you were freaked out and doubted what you were going. It was the right way. Is that safe to? Is that safe?
Uh, that is the very mild way of putting it. I would maybe phrase it and say there were times for most of that 2 years I was fucking
Yeah.
terrified. That's for most of that 2 years. The change that was required was so horrendous that I went into a very terrifying period of time because I had to change a lot of shit. And there's two things in that. One is changing shit is difficult because you have to look inside and you have to change it. But now you have the world around you, the people in your life who are going, what the
Mhm.
like, because you've been away for a weekend with this lunatic,
Lunatic
this
janitor.
yeah, the lunatic janitor. You're talking crazy shit because you are talking an alien language, and you come back and you change. But I had a sense of certainty that I wanted to do this, but it was very, very, very difficult. And as I'm listening to the question going through my mind, having done all the Tony Robbins work, but by the way, I mean I've done so much else as well, study with so many other people as well, obsessively. And I've been to India and I've meditated for decades. All of these things added to me having this toolkit to help me. But I still think that now it's many years since I've stood in a room with Tony Robbins, but I still think that his work is when you do something like UPW or his work is very powerful and very transformative. So as I'm listening to you, the question is, he does it so well and he immerses you in it. What the hell? But people still don't change. Like, what does it take for someone to wake up and change if in you tell me the figures, I don't know. If in 90% of cases, the people that will walk out of that theater at the end of a Tony Robbins event will not change, like they've been given everything, the emotional experience, the tools, the strategies, the environment. And what you're saying to me is they still don't change.
That's why I quit Tony. That's
Wh-
why,
What the
yeah, I
hell does
had
it
to
take?
know, and I had to know.
Hmm.
It takes a willingness to. It's almost like you have to go. It has to, like you said, for 2 years. When I quit Tony, it was for the first 4 years. Even still today, there's a part of me because I don't like to be a business owner. There's a certain crazy that comes along with being a business owner. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah,
just not
yeah.
that kind of
You know,
crazy. I want to do this.
yeah,
I want to work with people and go
yeah,
into the
yeah,
muckiness and watch the pops.
yeah.
And I see that people they have to be willing to willing to look in the mirror and realize that they are the most potent creative source in their reality, even when it hurts, right? I made 4 simple rules. First rule is we lie to ourselves first. Anytime I feel a
Yeah.
compression in my body that's telling me that I'm going to die here, stop moving. You're running the wrong way. Like you're moving from something that's going to cause you more pain down the road because the mind, we get what we focus on, right? And so I have to notice that. And then once I notice that, I can go, okay, what do I want? I want to go here. Okay, shift. And then we shift, and the body and the mind and the spirit are all programmed. We've got this calcified thing called the ego that wants to move in this direction. And everybody around you is now agreed upon that illusion that we're all operating out of and we're all floating down the same road. So somebody has to start to turn. And when you start to turn, I love talking to business owners because I believe business is a spiritual sport. I believe that it's a deeper version of what of what I'm doing, this depth work, because it requires, you have to offer more value than anybody else could ever expect. What's more spiritual than that? You got to be of service to your fellow man, and it's lonely. Other than being a parent, there's really not one that's more structurally like that. And there's rules. I could go into but they, but I believe that business owners are the biggest dreamers in the room. And the biggest dreamer in the room is the one holding, the one with the most awareness in the room. Tony used to say that with the one with the most certainty wins. What I've come to find out is the one that can hold the vision of reality in the room, the one that holds the biggest
Yeah.
vision, has the ability to create the biggest change. And so as a business leader, you holding on and for over that 2 years and being willing to turn the ship and say, no, this is the vision I have, and hold on to that so that everybody else around you, because they can't see what's in your head. I saw this vision of where I was going and I didn't want to go there anymore. And I saw a vision of where I wanted to go. And as a dreamer, as a true dreamer, you held on to that. And I believe the primary directive of the mind is to make meaning, make and navigate meaning. We are here to paint
Yeah.
everything within heaven and earth. So you held on to that idea and everybody said, no, no, no. And you said, watch. To get there, we've got to be able to hold on to that vision and hold on to it to the point to where the mind goes, okay, I see where you're orienting from now, and start to create you started to create new associations to where you probably found, I call them data downloads, epiphanies, moments of insight, where you held on to it. It didn't feel like it was going to happen. And all of a sudden you break through some
Yeah.
barrier and you look back and you went, huh, I was right. Like, wow. And all of a sudden you saw almost like a structure of reality open up to you, a deeper awareness, deeper insight, deeper perspective, all because you chose to hold the vision long enough for your mind to go, I see what you're navigating from now. Let me support you in the process. We all have to do that.
Yeah. Uh, I think, you know, what we're digging into here is this hard work between A and B. You know,
Yes.
if you're willing to have the realization, then are you willing to do the hard work to have the transformation, to have the outcome? And the thought I have as you're speaking is that we're talking about this 2 year period, which was a 2 years of intensity. It was 18 years ago. 2 years of intensity, but the journey never ends. In that there is no destination. There there never came there The point doesn't come where you go, "I'm there, it's done." Now, physically, things within it can be a number if you want a certain level of wealth, or you want to buy a home or buy a car or do s but on a personal level, that journey never ends. And for me, if the journey's never going to end, it means I need to be in a continuous environment of learning and support, which is what and the one thing I took away from Tony Robbins was this idea of immersion. And I'm conscious that we are immersed anyway, whether we choose to or not, because you turn on your TV, your radio, Twitter, you are immersed continually, but it's probably stuff you don't be immersed in. The question is, will you immerse yourself in those things that will serve your purpose? But that's my sense, is that for me, it has been never ending, but I love self-exploration, so it's not a challenge to me now, but it's never ending, and it's never ending growth. It's not a start here, I'll be done. How long will this take, Steve? How long will I have to work for you? Will I be fixed in 6 sessions? If not, I want my money back.
Well,
So
and you've
so
really hit on something. When you hit on this, what you've hit on is something in the underpinning of the mind. The mind creates this thing where we think we're trying to get somewhere, right? There's this,
that that is the
yeah,
crux of it. We
and
think we're
it's
trying to
not,
get somewhere.
it's an emergence.
There is
And
no
that
somewhere. Yeah.
emergence never ends. It's a constant opening up. It's a constant emergence. What you're hitting at here is the very underpinning of the structure of things. It's like, if I can allow myself to open up to that and see that there is no, because what happens is the mind wants to label. That's what it does. The mind creates meaning, and I
Yeah.
will
That's how we
that's right. We
understand,
we
isn't it?
we we make a
Yeah.
label and we go, "Oh, that's it."
Makes sense
Yeah,
to
and
the world.
it's all
Yeah.
shat at the end of the day. Every label that you make this is not really the color black. What you're seeing is the color black, and what I see is the color black. It's
Yeah.
not the same. Our rods in our mind aren't the same. You have a quarter size hole in your eye right now, but your mind fills that in. You don't know that because the nerves in your eyes cut that. There's no way that you could, there's a hole right here and right here. But we don't know that. And so the mind creates this meaning, even so much so that when you're sleeping, that's all it does is tell you more meaning. And so it's like we want to get to a point, but there is no point. And so people they come to me because I don't feel like I just can't find my purpose and I've lost my meaning. Well, they've lost their center. They've lost the ability to connect with like what I call the genius that comes through. There's a genius that comes through Paul. You are
Yeah.
the radioactive signal that comes through you in this moment could never be duplicated in this universe ever again. You are a unique voice that could never, and you're 13, the whole universe, 13.5 billion years it took to spit out Paul Ryan and gone. That's it. That's all we get is that one little blip of you. It's like, I spend so
Yeah.
much time trying to get somewhere that I forget that wherever I am is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And so then what is the purpose? Cause you and I are going to die and eventually this whole system that's holding up this podcast is gonna crash and the planet's gonna get sucked into a black hole and it's gonna spit out something else and a whole new species is gonna come out. They're gonna have 4 noses, 6 what we call, you know what I mean? And nobody will remember that we live. So then what's the
No.
purpose of all this? Well, what is the purpose that you're living in right now? What is the meaning that you're holding? What is that vision that you're holding on to? How does that make you? Are you in love? Are you in fear? How are you operating? I mean, that's your purpose. And really understanding that. And at any given time, I am right where I'm supposed to be experiencing, right what I'm supposed to experience, because that's the structure of the most creative potential that's coming through me in that moment. And what do I want? And then learning to steer from an understanding that like you said, I'm always driving the bus, whether I like it or not.
Mhm.
I'm always, and always, all the way from a flat perspective and all the way down to the very depth of me. I'm always in charge. It's just I forget because the root word for human being in Arabic is I've only got 40 to 50 bits, and it took a lot for me to stand here. And so we have to really start to reorient our total understanding of what reality is based upon that one statement. We are always emerging. There is no getting. There's no place to get. Where are you going? And people come around and they end up right
Where will
back
you
where they
be?
were. It's like you're right back where you were again, only now you get that where you're going wasn't where you were headed to begin with. And so it's like the journey. What's the purpose of the journey? Well, the purpose of the journey is the journey. That's it.
I sometimes think that, well, firstly, I think so very, very few people live with a sense of purpose. That's my experience of it. But my reflection on that is people never find purpose because they're looking for it. And the nature of looking is I look outside, and I think the location of the purpose is not where you're looking, it's inside. So maybe listen for purpose, close your eyes, sit quietly. I was very, very fortunate at about 19 years of age to stumble across meditation. And so I've had this practice for 40 years. And so you have this, I've barely missed a day. So you have this practice of sitting quietly. And when you sit quietly, in Paul's version of the world, when you sit quietly, then everything emerges and everything emerges and you begin to connect yourself because in my view it's all inside and which just has reminded me now that the title of your book is Turning Within. uh, is
That
that
that was
you know
exactly right.
and
Because
which of course I'm thinking we should get to your book, but I've completely forgotten about it. But that your book is Turning Within, and is that what Turning Within is about, or are you is it a different
yeah, so
meaning that you
everything
painted for
has
us? Like,
layers, right? So the first layer is okay, time to turn within. But notice that
mm,
even in that, there's an orientation from external focus to internal focus. There's a pivot point there. There's something really what it is it's turning within. This is what's coming from within me. This is who I am. There's something coming from within. There's a yeah, there's a
expression,
unique
is it?
expression of the universe that's trying to come through Paul that can only come through Paul, and it's
Mm,
coming from within. My experience of reality comes from within. It's really
yeah,
understanding the depths of the structure of the mind, and we co-create this reality. And when you start to do that, we start to see shadow contracts and how you and I have made this agreement that I'm going to do this if you do that. And we enter into the relationships. the Jerry Maguire, if you've ever seen it, at the end of it, he says,
Yes.
"You complete me." Now I'm coming, you talk
Yeah.
about purpose. Now I'm looking for completion, which means that in the core, I'm coming from a feeling of incomplete. So now I'm orienting
Yeah.
from this
Empty.
this need for completion. And if you don't give me what I need, and there's no way I can solve an internal equation externally. So I can't find, as soon as I go looking for a purpose out
Yes.
here, I'm lost. I'm going to be lost.
You
Yeah.
can't find it. It's
Yeah.
not there.
So
You're looking.
turning within allows me, let's call it meditation for the modern age. It's depth work. It takes Tony stuff. It takes meditation. It
Yeah.
takes breath work. It takes whatever the structure, all roads lead to Rome. How do I figure out what is the signal that's yearning for express, screaming in my ear for me
Um,
to speak my
yeah.
truth?
If you're
Yeah.
listening to it.
But for
But you're distracted by everything in the world from the time you're a child, and you've stopped listening, and so you've stopped hearing. And then if I roll back 18 years ago, the misery in my life, I was gonna say all our lives, but I can only speak for myself. The misery in my life was a calling back inwards. All these external challenges, it to me was my inner self going, "You're off
I think it's amazing.
course."
I think when you look at the structure of, I'm gonna go real woo woo because I'm coming out of, as I engage here this material. Um, uh, we come from this world where the more I try to chase it, the worse it gets, and eventually, at some point, I have to stop and go, okay, what's really going on? The system is designed in such a way where the hero's journey. Go look at, I think Joseph Campbell goes in and looks, yeah,
Joseph Campbell,
every
yeah.
story, this is the thing. Every
Every
movie,
movie.
every book, every movie, everything that's
Yeah.
ever stuck, otherwise it won't stick. It won't make any sense to us. Has a very specific,
Hero's
there's a
journey.
groove that's been, and we go into narrative transportation when we get sucked at. Why? Because we just kind of blend in with the water and we become part of. Why is that? Because that's how we are structured inside. And so we all are structured to go through this. Oh, you don't get it yet? Don't worry. It's going to keep getting worse until you figure it out. Like, don't
Okay.
worry. The what is it? The beatings will continue until the morale improves. Thing, right?
Yeah. But for so many people, the beatings
Yes.
continue all their lives, and the morale never improves. And I'm interested I'm going to tell you why I think that is, and I'm interested what your perspective is. And I think the reason why why you never look inside is because you're freaking
Yes.
terrified. And it's funny, when I had my aha moment, um, thanks to Tony Robbins in 2006, um, it was out of tremendous fear. So what emerged that weekend for me was absolutely obvious that I was running my business in a way that was very stressful and just was not me. Now, that was obvious. You didn't need to be Einstein to figure that out, but I was in it. It was completely obvious and I couldn't see it. So the question I've to why couldn't I see it? Because I was too terrified to look at it. Because if I looked at it, it meant I had to make changes that were going to be very personally challenging for me. And so ultimately, why wasn't I changing? Because I was
It-
afraid to
Absolutely.
change. And is it that people go through their lives distracting themselves with what's going on in the world, never looking inside because they're afraid of what they'll discover if they
Well,
look inside? Is
what
that the shadow you spoke of
Yeah,
very
well, the
earlier on?
shadow is the parts we hide, repress, and deny. So I get this, you're floating down the river of the story called Paul in the boat called Now. And notice you've always been in the
Yeah.
river of the story called Paul. You've never been in the river of the story called Stephen. And there's just this, yeah,
And it's always
it's
now.
always in it's your mind can go anywhere but now. It usually does, but it never goes. And here we are, we're just
Yeah.
floating. And I make a meaning and I go, yep, yep, yep. And the boat gets higher and higher. And what happens is,
Yeah.
now I'm floating and all of a sudden, um, all of a sudden something happens and it reminds me of something that happened down here that, like you said, was too painful for me to look at. And it
Yeah.
casts a shadow
Yeah.
across the entire boat. And until I'm willing to go down and look at this, well, then it'll keep happening. And the mind seems to be, I think there's this, again, another genius system. We are the mind is this evolved system and it's evolved higher than we could possibly imagine. and it's a re-evolution. Revolution, it's a re-evolution where we're now noticing that the mind has this thing and it goes, I can't deal with it. So it projects it out. And because we've been programmed to stay on the surface and avoid pain, the National Science Foundation suggests that 95% of the thoughts that you think day after day are repetitive. Like you're thinking the same thoughts over. Just go back and look at your days and your weeks and your months, and just don't take my word for it. Go look, like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
They also suggest that over 85 to 87% of the thoughts that you think are survival rooted attack thoughts, awfulizing, negative bias, confirmation bias. They're trying to avoid some suffering that we don't want to happen in our life. Mark Gaffney calls it the false self. And so there's this structure of thought where you're spending most of your time trying to avoid something, and then you orient from this unconscious identity. Why would I ever solve that? If I'm a sailor, if I'm a castaway and I'm on an island and I don't have any navigation equipment and all I have is this boat and I don't know how to navigate into the deep ocean, I don't know how to orient, how far away from that coast am I going to get? The mind will create problems. I've seen people come, I'm in Serbia, I'm doing an advanced business training, and this gal's she's one of the highest paid gynecologists in the field. And she's in Serbia. And at that time Serbia was very, they're modernizing, but again, very, corrupt and different kind of corruption. Like here, we know, yeah, we get it. Like we saw what's happening with Biden and all that. And like all that. I don't want to get into the politics of it. That's not what this is about. But in Serbia, you're right, let's not do that. They'll just pull up in a car and somebody will jump out in a black car and they'll just grab you and stick you in the car. You'll never see that person again.
It's a different level,
right?
Yeah.
And so she's like, there's a lot of corruption. People are dying. I don't know what to do. Well, this is a business workshop and I was teaching people how to scale and exit their business. And so she's just freaking out. She doesn't know what to do. And we finally got to it that she was scared because she knew how to go into the surgery. This is where half truth becomes more dangerous than full lie. She was great at that. So she assumed she would be great at everything, but her mind knew that she didn't know how to run a business. And the fear that came along with stepping into the unknown was so great that she wouldn't even consider. I said, well, why don't you just scale, bring some people in? And, oh, nobody can do what I do. Mariana, you mean to tell me that nobody, 8.5 billion people on this planet and nobody can, nobody. And we finally got to the point that she was scared. So we did some processes like the Dickens process. It's kind of my jam, right? And we stepped past it. And 3 hours later, we're at a VIP dinner. And she pulls me aside. She's just like she just came from UPW. She's livid. She's like, yeah. Oh, there's these two doctors across the hall from me. She said, and they're always asking me questions. I think they would be part of these guys are great. And this lady, I was her preceptor when she was getting her doctorate. She just called me like 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks prior, she'd been called 3 weeks prior. This lady's looking for work, and I'm looking at her. I'm because this structure just came out there, and I'm just blown away. I'm like, Mariana, where were those people 3 hours ago? I just couldn't see them.
It's really interesting that you talk about this challenges business owners have with scaling and exit their business, because that's kind of the area that interests me. And a lot of the business owners that I talk to are at that point where they've become very successful. So money's not a problem. They have the business, but they look around and they go, but I'm miserable. I'm unhappy. And what they often need to do is what I need to do, which is what I need to create a bit. I mean, my goal was, if I hate my business, then I have two options. One is get rid of my business, but it makes a lot of money. So that's, I'm now solving one problem, creating another. So how can I create a business that I love? And so I said, well, how can I create a business that I love? And I needed to significantly change the culture. I needed to move people out of the business, all these terrifying things.
Which is really the hard, because most of the time what people will do, they'll come to me and they want to completely restructure. They want to move from A to Z. They're not happy here. So like, I'm going to cut all that and go do this other thing. That's what you just said was, I wanted to retool where I was already at to better align with a deep depth work, right? A deeper version of who I am. That's the harder answer. And people don't want to do that. They want to just,
Course
no,
it is, yeah.
no, no. This doesn't work. No, it's not again, it's not the external, it's the internal vision that you're holding on to. And that exactly, like, that's genius right there.
You have hit on exactly why this show is called The Inner Entrepreneur. And it's called The Inner Entrepreneur because I mix with lots of CEOs, business owners, and they go, how do you do what you do? Because I have a management team now that run my two businesses. How do you do that, Paul? It's just stuff. And they want the technique, the tools, which are fine. But I'm thinking, it's a bit like Tony used to say, 80% psychology, 20% tools or whatever. And I would go, yeah, the hard part was not figuring out the how to, because the libraries and the bookshelves are filled with books on how to run your business. That's not the challenge. The challenge is how to become the person who can do that. So can you face the personal challenges? Can you face the personal demons that will allow you to fix those problems? And that's the challenge. And so if I'm working with people, that's where it begins, is can you look inside? And so the hardest part is going to be, can you look inside? Not can you do what's needed to do outside? So and this is in my view, you've said a couple times, business is the most one of the most spiritual things you can do. And I think it is. I think because to become really successful in business, and when I say really successful in business, I do not mean make a lot of money. I mean, make money, but create a great life for you, for your employees. If you can do all that, that is a spiritual game, because you're creating something out of nothing. The hardest part is looking inside, which is what this whole podcast is about, is talking about a subject that I believe people don't talk about, was what's inside the entrepreneur. And that's what gives me a buzz, that conversation. I don't want to talk to people about their business, to be honest with you. I'll talk about you, but I'm not, because when you fix you, the business, you'll be able to
That's
solve
right.
the business
Well,
problem.
and so this is called a construct, right? So if you take the
Yeah.
boat, this is what makes the boat. We make meaning. If I dissect the meaning, there's 7 facets to your structure, right? So I have an identity. Identity is the most powerful force in the human dynamic, right? We have a plot right now in your mind. Everybody say hello. There they are. They don't shut up. And that plot's always running.
Yeah.
And in the boat called now, I'm constantly, there's something always informing me of what this means. Translation, right? There's a flow to it. There's a certain flow that the story form, we know that the river's going to flow. So there's going to be a dark night of the soul and they're going to come through. Like, there's a structure that we know. Again, the button in the box sits right there at story. We become addicted to the pattern, right? Game theory sits down there. There's a whole, Joseph Campbell sits down there. I usually load shadow down there, although it covers the whole boat. And then we got beliefs, like, think of how certain you are that the sun, how certain are you, Paul, that the sun is going to come up tomorrow?
Well, I live in Ireland, so I can't be very certain.
Now you're just bragging.
Yeah, but I'm very certain the sun will come up, and I'm very
That's
certain the
right.
clouds
I'm
will
certain I
cover
won't be able to see it,
December.
right? So, and how certain are you that the
Yeah.
sun came up today?
Oh, 100%.
How
Absolute
certain are you that the sun came up yesterday? And now notice your
Entirely
part
certain,
of
yeah.
you now is going, okay, what's he fishing for? And you're starting to reach in and go, okay, wait a minute. Now look at where you hold that certain. Yeah,
Kinda tricky.
the sun has never come up. There is no up. Like, in the structure of where you're
Yeah,
at, it looks like
yeah,
it's coming up, but
yeah. We just
that's
move and
right.
we
You're
see it.
spiraling through the
It's revealed.
universe, spinning around a ball of flame. And we do that 7
It never
times. We
comes
call
up.
that a week, right? But that's not really what's happening. It's just our orientation to what's happening. And that happens always and always. And that's where, I'm not good enough. Like, I'm going to get trapped in a basement, that I'm going to be rejected. It loads right there. And then all these touch. And then, of course, that's going to drive my emotions, which is going to dictate my agency. What I know is even possible. Like, if I told you, Paul, I had $1 million check right here, but you had to be here in an hour to get it. You had to be personally at my door in an hour to get it. You're like, there's just no way. Your mind wouldn't even give you,
Yeah.
because you can't fly, and you can't, like, there's just certain things that because your mind knows I'm not even going to give that.
So I close
Yes.
off the
Well, if I don't
possibility
think I'm
because
good enough, there's certain things,
yeah,
again, I just couldn't see it. And the mind blocks that out, which then
yeah.
is going to dictate the actions that I take consciously and unconsciously, the rituals, the habits, all of that. There's not a piece of your awareness that doesn't fit in here. And the problem is that people don't know this is going on. And I believe business owners, what they're doing is they are at some level trying to find themselves. At some level, they're trying to find, and you can call it a win, you can call it God, you can call it purpose, you can call it whatever you want. Joseph Campbell said that I don't think that people are so much looking for a purpose as they are an experience of being alive. So that gal with the button in the box, she was surviving this feeling of worthlessness, even though she's absolutely worthy. This she works in an intensive care unit. Like she's an amazing soul. And here she is thinking that
Yeah.
she's gonna die if she doesn't buy this. She's lying to herself, telling herself she's gonna die if she doesn't buy this. And then she feels like she just died because it arrived. And she thinks that in her structure of thought, she believes that she's surviving this. She's not. You're fine. You're okay. Breathe. Calm down. I call it the rain. Recognize that you're lying to yourself. Allow and accept
Mm.
that this is called the human condition. I pat myself on the,
Yeah.
it's okay that I
Yeah.
believe my bull crap. It's not true, right? And then investigate
We
and then
all
nurture the need. Structurally realign from the now. As a business owner, I think we learn to go through these moments where we feel like we're going to die and we see that we've lived through it so that we can prove to ourselves that we are the most potent creative force in our reality, that I am all powerful, that I get to dictate my reality. And when we finally hold on to that and with loose hands, because the universe is going to test you in new and exciting ways, all of a sudden
we
now we enter into another level of the business. And now all of a sudden that thing that had no purpose, that had no meaning, I'm not trying to survive not having purpose and not having meaning. Now I can see I've got the crayon in my hand and I get to paint whatever I want. And instead of crumpling up the piece of paper that's in front of me to start over, why not just paint the picture right where I'm at? Because I'm going to end up right where I'm at anyways.
Yeah, you're talking about moving from survive to thrive.
Yes.
And when I was in that place, when I talk about those, when I was returning back to Ireland from that trip and going, okay, you need to radically change. We need to change the business. I knew what needed to be changed, and I knew it would be very hard to do. And I think that that is the challenge, is confronting the willingness. Well, but I think also a trick I play with myself sometimes is when I want to create something, is I imagine it five years in the future. I'm in the process of building a mastermind group called the 1 Hour CEO. But when I came up with to effectively teach other enterprise and business owners how I've run my business in it, and but when I began to think about that, instead of thinking, could I do that in 6 months' time, my game with myself is I go, could I do that in 5 years? Because if I put it out 5 years, then I
Brilliant.
allow myself to be honest about
That's
what
brilliant.
this is what I really would love to do. But if I go 6 months' time, it's like your plane journey. I can't do it. I
That right
shut
there, I
down.
can't do
But
it.
if I
We'll
give
lock out the strategy that sits at the decision that'll show you how. But the other
yeah,
piece is because you gave yourself you give yourself enough room, you go, okay, I can get people will people will people will overestimate what they can do in a year and they will underestimate what they can do in 10. Right. So
yes,
now that you see it, the
yeah,
mind then, because it's brilliant, the mind is way smarter than we get. There's way more going on in us than we could ever imagine. And so since you see it at 5 years, the mind then finds all the shortcuts. So you've given yourself the ability
yeah,
to basically buy into your bullshit. It's like, I'm going to buy into this vision. I can do that in 5 years. And the mind goes, watch this.
yeah. You're buying
Yeah.
into
Then the
your
mind
bullshit.
goes,
Yeah,
watch
yeah.
this. And it does in
And then you
6 months,
make it
right?
real.
Because it bought into the
Yeah,
outcome. And
I
again,
agree.
the how is the least important part of it's important. Again, without integration, the insight doesn't matter. You can hold on to this vision all you want, but just standing there in your Cheeto dirty sweatshirt, not moving, watching Big Bang Theory reruns or whatever we,
It
we
won't happen.
watch in Ireland, right?
Yeah,
That's not going to get you there,
yeah.
right?
Big
You
Bang
got to
Theory
get
has
up and
brilliant.
move, but
Yeah,
the mind will then shorten the cycle in dramatic ways as long as I'm willing to lean into. And the other piece is some part of you had to let go of everything that you got, that the other vision, the vision of the pain, everything that you got out of identifying this is who I am. You also had to let go of, I'm no longer going to be that guy. I am no longer going to associate my reality from getting my needs met from whatever that was there. Because if I don't let go of that, I can't grab on it. I can't stay where I'm at and get where I'm going at the same time. I've got to be willing to let go. And that's the hard part, because now I'm in the ocean. I can't see the island anymore. And so my mind is instantly going to
I got
start to see the monsters in the deep. And then the mind then starts to project that. And then I start to navigate, learning how to navigate from new unknown territory through that 2-year journey, and learning how to navigate. That's the work, right? Learning how to navigate into the unknown in new and exciting ways.
Yeah, it's like your story of your £1,000,000 check. If I can get there within an hour, which I can't. But if you said to me, well, can you get here within 24 hours? I mean, I'm on the other side of the planet, so it's still a challenge in that. But I'm going, I can download again. So now my
Yep.
belief changes, because I go, well, it is possible. Might be challenging. Can I get a flight? Blah blah blah. And now my mind starts begin strategizing. Now I move up your thing, because I start taking action. I make different decisions. I have a different emotion, and now my identity begins to change.
Yes.
As
Because
I'm
they
going to
feed
get
off
that
of one
million
another.
pound
They're
check.
all connected. And so I reorient.
They're
You're
all beautiful.
reorienting. You're recreating reality. You're impacting at the very quantum level. And then everything lines up. You start to find. Carl Jung called it synchronicity, where people get up. They see it all the
Yeah.
time, mostly because, again, it was 87% of us is survival rooted. If I'm operating out of that, then I'll get up late. I'm late for work. I'm going in every red light that I could possibly hit. Now, how is that possible? I think that's interesting. It's like, well, yeah, that happens to me all the time. Well, of course, because
Yeah.
you're navigating from that survival. What you then probably started to notice at some point was these synchronicities where you'd walk into and all of a
Entirely.
sudden this
Yeah.
guy met that I would have never thought, Paul jumping out of nowhere saying,
Mm.
"Hey, Steve, let's do an interview." Would have never even seen that coming
Never.
out of the void it came. And because I just keep moving in this direction, because I know I've chosen. It's not that I know where I'm going from a goal. It's the difference between, you have your conscious thought, then you have what's called the subconscious, I call it, or presuppositions, and then you have the deep conscious. Most people call that unconscious. I call that the deep conscious. I've learned to orient from intention, which sits at the subconscious. The goal is important. Because it allows me to see if
Mm.
but that's an orientation tool to see, is the
Yeah.
intention getting the outcome that I want? I'm holding on to an intention. I'm moving from that intent. And then the goals then help me align. And then what happens is the universe then aligns in my favor based upon that. I've learned to trust that more than I trust you're going to die here. Because I still tell myself you're going to die. You're going to get rejected
Yeah.
by Paul. You're going to get rejected. He's not going to like this. Not going to understand you. You're talking a bunch of woo woo, but it makes sense. And it's like, it's very practical. What we're talking about is so practical that people mistake it for woo woo. It's more practical than anybody could ever understand. And it's more woo woo than they could ever understand. It's a both and kind of conversation. And the mind isn't built to wrap around that much paradox. But that's what business owners are dealing with.
The thing that strikes me, though, is what you said about intention really, really connects, because what I have learned to do over the years is intention for me comes from my body. It's a sense. I can't really trust my mind, to tell me the truth, all of the time, but but I can trust my body. If my body feels I'm on the right road, I most likely am. If it feels like it's on the wrong road, even if my mind is justifying, I've learned to trust my gut, my intent. But the thing I have also found, and I agree, certainly once you have that vision in place, that intention in place, synchronicities do need to line up. But they begin to, with me, they also start to push me out of my
Yes.
comfort zone. So along that journey, it's not now that I'm in flow, I'm enlightened, and everything is just fine and dandy. It's I'm moving along the right road, but I will be challenged to see if I'm genuinely committed. Fears will come up, and I will have to be. I suppose I was going to say, when I'm creating that new identity, and the old identity wants
Yes.
to remain, and so me being pushed out of my comfort zone is probably just, and you know this better than I do, is probably just my old identity going, what are you doing? You're not the guy who comes on podcast with. What do you want? What do you know? And you go, well, but if I get on and do this and talk about my stuff and talk about my book, then I begin to form that new identity, and that's maybe how you begin to
So I got up
rewire
every
yourself. That
morning. I get up, I get on my knees. So I have this neck, I call it my high knee. So every morning you may have caught
Mhm.
me. I may have already been doing it. I get up, I get on my knees. There's a certain prayer. They call it the 7-step prayer. And then I get up and I state my mission. My mission is to evolve the collective consciousness. It's actually my calling as I moved away from the word mission is too impactful, too abrasive. My calling is to engage the innate genius and evolve the collective consciousness that's woven into the human condition. And that's what I'm doing. And hopefully you could feel me. And I get up and I put this necklace around my neck and I go throughout my day.
Mm.
And I've been doing this now since April 14th of 2000. I've been doing this process, and then if I get lost, I just go up. It's an anchor. I can go up and I can trigger myself.
You'll
People
be
have these triggers that they're in. It's like
yeah.
my wife puts on, she's a hospice nurse and she puts on her nursing
Mm.
gear. And when she puts on that gear and she puts her stethoscope, a different, like
Yeah.
we were on going on vacation and this lady fell down and I saw this part of her came online. It's like, go do, and all of a sudden I'm like, yes, ma'am. Like, yes, I do that anyways,
You
but
knew
yeah,
what to
right.
do. Yeah.
And so, and then I
Yeah.
get at the end of the day, I take it off and I go, what did I do today to move the dial? And every day for the
Yeah.
past 25 years now, I've done that, something like that, that ritual. And it's formed this identity that you see in front of you. Like, again, this is not the identity that I've got the bum. One of my identities that I still, it bubbles up and I'll trip into it. Like, Ram Dass said that shadow is the greatest teacher in helping us come to the light because I don't go looking for my suffering, but when it comes up inadvertently underneath, I'll find grace. And so
Mm.
it comes up and I now
Yeah.
know how to check it. Is that,
Yeah.
oh, you're believing that you're going to be rejected. Okay,
Mm.
breathe, buddy, calm down. What do you really want? And then I can orient.
It comes up to be
Yeah,
healed, I suppose.
it's a healing process, but
Yeah.
I wanna move past that word healing because it's like people hear that, and again, that's one of them woo woo. It's a recalibrating of our conscious
Yes,
awareness,
yes.
and again, we just gotta reorient. It's just a reorientation that you went through. That 2 years you went through was it can feel a lot like scratching at cement to try to dig a building to build, with your fingertips. It could feel like
Yeah.
that.
It's
And it
yeah.
should, because the universe is going to go, oh, is that what you want? Well, how
Mm.
bad do you want it?
Yeah.
Are,
Are
are,
you
are you
willing to
willing
do
to
this?
die for this? And it's like so
Yeah.
many people I see, they want the fire, but they don't want to get burned. It's like, and like, oh no, I'm willing.
Mm.
Okay, watch this. As a matter of fact, I had a guy this weekend, one of my clients this weekend, brilliant man, business owner, having a terrible time with his family. We go in and we do some work and he sees it. And now, here it is, Thanksgiving. I believe, we just celebrated Thanksgiving here. And I believe these threshold moments, they bring us those pieces in the deep that we don't want to, and it's just opportunities to grow. And he got tripped up and he fell and he had to stop and like, are you operating? I am. And it's like when we're in it, I call it the fourth rule. I call it black hole sun.
Yeah.
My mind circles around a problem and then I can't break free from this feeling that I'm going to be abandoned, or you're not going to love me. And so then I start to validate that. And all of a sudden I hit I hit a tipping point where I'm locked into that identity. And that black hole sun is now as if a sun, instead of it casting light, it is casting that very specific, you're going to fail here. And here's what it's going to look like. And my mind is navigating. Now it's plotting its own demise. It's trying to see where that's happening so I can try to keep that from happening. And now I'm navigating from that island again. I'm back on that island of suffering.
Mm.
And so it's like
Yeah.
noticing that and going, okay, there you are. Stop moving. You're right where you didn't want
Yeah.
to be. That's again, there's no emergence. There's
Redirect.
just an emerging. There's a constant, there's no depth work is either doing or not doing. It's never done. There's always another layer to the onion.
Yeah.
There's another rung to be climbed. There's another lesson to be learned. And as you go through that, you start to understand the structure. When they say that we're living in a holographic fractal universe, you start to understand what they mean by what they call this a simulation system. You start to see how you are the primary creative force in your reality. And I can only get that through stopping, like you get still, you meditate, stopping and listening to the voice and realizing one guy who's talking to, he's getting ready to have this massive, he's an artist. He's getting ready. He hasn't done a show in 7 years. He's got this mayor of the city coming and this big thing. And what is this? He's operating from failure, operating from the certainty
Mm.
that this guy's a genius and he's operating from the certainty that, and why? Because that's what he was taught to manage. That's the risk that his mind was taught to program. We have to reorient that. It's a collective problem that can only be solved intimately. We're all in the work together, and all of us are collectively, I believe, suffering from this experience of being human, and we're trying to orient from it, and we're trying to realize what it is. Business owners do it at a bigger level, but it's still the same thing. I'm trying to figure out what is this thing called humans that I find myself in, because I believe we're God. You're God having a Paul experience, and you don't know what that we don't know what that experience is, but we're coming. I just believe that where we're at, we wouldn't have been able to have this conversation a year ago, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Like this conversation has now reached a point to where we can say, okay, structurally, quantum physics, this is what we know is going on. And if you add it all up, this is where we're at. And what are you going to do about it? Because you're at the window and you only get a brief period of time. And we're going to have 13.5 billion years where other things will be at the window, but you're here now and you matter. You in the general scheme of things, we make no difference at all. And you are the universe's feature presentation. Yep.
You are at this point in time, and I feel we could talk about this for hours, Stephen. But there's a few takeaways as we draw this to an end. I'm thinking, and one is you said there about this practice you've had for 25 years, and I suppose that was the first thing that struck me because it resonates very much. I mean, I started meditating when I was 19 years of age, and I'm 59, so it's a long time, and it's a journey, and it's never ending. And if I live to 89, I won't have gotten there. So I think I would say that's possibly the first takeaway for anyone listening to this is that whatever once you pursue the path of personal growth, it's an inner journey and it never ends because it's ever evolving. So don't beat yourself up because you don't feel I've gotten there. And the second thing you said, which resonate with, is that we're having a human experience, which means when you feel self doubt or criticism or failure, we always feel that's uniquely us, but but that is an emotion, that is the human experience. Um, we will all experience that. But I think the most important thing you can do with that is the witnessing of that. Once you're in it, it's not going to feel good. I've been there, but you recognize, but I'm having a human experience, and therefore this is part of it. So the bet when I have that, what I try and do is be gentle with myself, give myself some time, take care of myself, and recognize that I will need to move through this. But fighting and suppressing is not the answer. So as we bring this to an end, Stephen, what from your well, a few things. What is the takeaway you'd leave with everyone? Where can people find you? Where can people find your book, and how can they learn more about
Yeah,
the
you can
work you're
find the
doing?
book any Amazon, Barnes and Noble, like anywhere that sells mainstream books, right? You can, yeah, it's a great
Great
book.
books.
Anywhere that sells great books, you can find it. You can find me at
Exactly.
Mastering.
And the book is
It
Turning
looks like
Within, just so
this.
people
It looks
remember
like
that
this
title.
right here. Phenomenal book. Of course,
Well, we'll put a link to the
there you
book in
go.
the show
And
notes.
then
So
you can find me at Mastering Change, because I think that's what we're all here doing. Masteringchange .com. You can
yeah,
there's an app. There's an app for that, right? Oh, I'd like to learn more. There's an app for that. If you download right now we're calling it a shadow work app. It's moving away from shadow work. People got stuck on that word. Depth work is what it is. We're going to the depth of who we are. So there's a depth work app. It looks like this. And there's a 30-day mental cleanse program that operates at the plot level, the second facet of your construct. You can download that. And really find Facebook, LinkedIn, like Instagram. I'm anywhere where smoke signals, telepathy, don't care. If you're in a place where you're ready for something, there's something like you said, there's something knocking at your door. And many times that looks like a hero's journey, some dark night of the soul, if you're in
yeah.
that space, that's my jam. If you're looking to try to understand where this is going, that's my jam. If you're at a place where threshold moments really are kind of the place that I exceed at, because I can show you. everything. If let me leave you with this. If I believe that we're all living a big grand story, and I believe that if I can know that I'm telling myself a story while I'm in the story, if I can
If I can
recognize it, that's the
recognize it.
key, right? Is to
Yeah.
forget, right? If I can realize that I'm telling myself a story when I'm in the story, that story can teach me everything because everything is fractal. It can teach me everything about myself, about my brothers and sisters, about the nature of reality. Ultimately, I'm going to use the word God, and notice the connotations in your minds when I go to that word. That's not
Mm.
what I mean. That's just your structure of it. It's and we're all trying to break out. But I have to be willing to. I have to be willing to know. I have to be willing to lean in to the reality that this is all story. At the end of the day, it's all. There's no saber-toothed tiger chasing you. That we are living in the greatest time on the planet that we know of ours, at least as far as this version, to be alive. There's never been a greater time in our history with opportunities, with potential, and the ability to make a massive impact on your brothers and sisters. And if I hold on to that, and I choose to believe that, I look over at my story that says somehow I stubbed my toe and my life is going to end. I can see, I can see just how myopic I can
Yeah.
get, how narcissistic I can get in a matter of just 2 seconds. So if you've not heard today that I love you, and thank you.
Stephen, it's been a wonder to talk to you, and the depth of not only your personal experience, but just your knowledge on this subject is mind blowing. And what impresses me, but what I love most when I speak to people is when their knowledge is deeply connected with personal experience. And because knowing a subject is great, having the knowledge and having the lived experience, I think is where great teachers emerge. So I look forward to getting a copy of your book, and I wish you the very best. And Stephen, it's been an
Same here,
absolute
brother.
pleasure, and
Thank
thank you
you,
for
brother.
joining
Thank you
us.
very much for what you're doing. You
My
too.
pleasure.